There we go. There we go. Good. So I'm here to talk to you about stories. I'm here to talk to you about your mission from the Valley News School. I'm going to show you some story. I'm going to talk about story. I'm going to even use the guitar a little bit. And you're going to do some work for me. Not real intensive. You don't need any electronics for what we're going to do today. If you have the ability to leave your phones and computers away, I'm a big fan of just sometimes leaving it away. So if you can, you want to do that. So why don't we start with a story? So here's the story. I have done it in competition. It is called Today I Am a Man. If anyone wants to look at the clock, it should be about 4 minutes and 56 seconds, give or take. So when you're 13 and you're a Jewish boy, you read from the Torah, and we call that your bar mitzvah. Bar mitzvah being a good deed. And there is no greater deed in our religion than to study. Or maybe to help others. So the Wednesday before my bar mitzvah, which is November 1st, the day after I turn 13, my birthday is Halloween, I am standing in the sanctuary, and there's a bima, so there's a thing like that, and I'm standing with the Torah open, and my Hebrew tutor is Meyer Schisler. And what I remember most about Meyer Schisler is he had numbers on the inside of his arm. He had been in the death camps. He never spoke about it. He never hid the numbers, but he never talked about it, and he didn't dare let him catch you staring at his form. I was not a very good student, at least not back then. So I was butchering the Hebrew, and he stopped me and he said, Benjamin, my Hebrew name, it's in God's hands now. And he walked away out of the sanctuary. And I stood there facing a room. I was going to be in front of hundreds of family and friends and people from the community in 3 days. And I hadn't learned enough in 4 years to know what I'm going to do in 3 days, but I was scared to death. One of the things we do during this service, we read the Hebrew, and we have a speech where we thank the rabbi, and we thank our mom and our dad, and yes, our brothers, and we say this sentence, today I am a man. Well, the day came, and I had two desires. One, to get through my bar mitzvah. I was scared to death. My grandfather was going to be there, and he was a pretty serious dude. You didn't want to screw up in front of your grandfather. But I knew that it was going to be pretty tough to get through it. And the other thing is I didn't want to be Gary Davis. 3 weeks before my bar mitzvah, Gary had his bar mitzvah. And Gary wasn't a great student either. And Gary got stuck during his reading of the Torah, so he quietly put his hand over the microphone the wrong way and whispered into the mic, Rabbi, what's this word? And everyone in the sanctuary laughed at poor Gary Davis. And he was only doing what every one of us who'd been up there wanted to do, which is get help. And I did not want that to happen to me. And I got up and I got through it. And I said, yes, today I am a man. But I was no more a man the next day than I was the day before the bar mitzvah. I was a 13-year-old kid who'd gone up and done something torturous. But it also opened the door to me being a practicing Jew the rest of my life. So I guess it started my path. I was 13 then. 4 years later, I'm a senior in high school. And we're at that grandfather I told you about house. My mom and my aunt were identical twins. There were 7 kids between the two of them. And we'd get together for Sunday afternoon deli tray, and we'd play cards, we'd eat, we'd tell stories. And at the end of the dinner, I happened to have a car at this point. The reasons for which I'm going to tell you in the next story. And I said to my mom, I know you're leaving, but I want to stay with Grandpa. Grandpa was a Camel, no-filter cigarette smoker. He got emphysema. And he was on oxygen. And after the visit with everybody, he was exhausted, so he had to go into his bedroom and sit and just lay in bed, sit up in bed, with the oxygen on. And my grandfather was a titan of industry. Think of an adult you know who's scary every time you see them, except if perhaps you see him if he loves someone like his grandchildren. Grandpa High was like that. He was fierce. I walked into his bedroom this day, and his oxygen tank wasn't working. And I saw a look on his face I'd never seen my whole life. He was afraid. I didn't know my grandpa could be afraid. He could be angry, he could be rude, he could be tough, he could be joyful, he could tell great stories. He was fearful. And my grandma said, the oxygen tank isn't working. I'm not sure what we should do. I didn't know either. But there was a phone number on the oxygen tank. When I called it, this was North Suburban Chicago. The oxygen tank company was on the far southwest side of Chicago, easily an hour and a half away. When I called them, I got an answering machine. I knew that wasn't going to help us. And I had no idea how much oxygen he needed, so I don't know if it was life or death. It felt life or death to me. So then I went to the Yellow Pages, and I found an oxygen supply company, and they were the next town over, and they had a live operator, and the ad in the Yellow Pages said 24/7, always live operator. I thought, well, that's a good thing. And when they answered the phone, they said, we'll have somebody there in 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, these two guys, both like 6 feet tall, with these huge tanks of oxygen, come wheeling in. They show us how they work. They said they're working. They said if one wasn't to work, the other definitely would. And if both didn't work at 2:45 in the morning, we'll be here before 3 in the morning. All you have to do is call the number 24/7. And I saw my grandfather's face relax. Grandma had tears down her eyes. He hugged me and they thanked me, and it was time for me to go home. I had some homework to do. And I walked out of their apartment, and I actually stopped at the door of the car before I got in, and I said, you know, today I am a man. That was my bar mitzvah day. That was the day I was really called to be an adult in this world and do something of significance. How many of you would describe yourselves as introverts? Raise your hands. High. Raise them high. I was a wallflower when I was your age. Now we're going to get to why did Ben have a Firebird convertible when he was a senior in high school. It was a pity car. Sophomore, junior year of high school, I was water skiing at spring break in Miami with my dad. And I fell. And I felt something pop. It was my L5 disc in my back, at the bottom of the disc where the spine attaches. It popped forward. And if it goes to here, it's a 4.999 slip. Any more, and you lose the use of your lower body for the rest of your life. I didn't know all this. I just knew my back popped. But I was having fun. So I got right back up, and I water skied for another half hour. Later that day, I was laying down by the pool. We were at a resort, and my legs were numb. I was laying on my stomach. So I flipped over, and my legs started to feel better again. I said, Dad, something weird happened when I was water skiing. I ended up having the back fused, and the way they did that back in the day, I was the 9th person in the whole country to have the surgery. And I was too young and stupid to have any fear. When they said you needed it, I said, great, so do it, and then, I'll go forward. Nothing bad could happen, right? All sorts of bad things could happen. But I didn't know it. So here's how it worked. I went to the hospital. They took bone from my left hip. They pulled my spine back. I grew 2 inches on the table, and they melted the bone to the spine. And then they put 2 rods in to attach to the back. But they weren't done. So then I went back to the hospital room, and I was in a circle bed. So basically, picture a flat mattress and a circular frame. So when they wanted to get me from my back to my stomach, they put a second mattress on me, and they flipped me 180 degrees. And this went on for 2 weeks, every day, several times a day, this way and that way. 2 weeks later, they then took me back in the operating room. They opened me up from the front, and they fused the spine from the front. Today, it's a 2-hour surgery. They do it all at once, and you walk home the next day. Back then, and granted, I was in wallflower. This when I was scared of my own shadow. Once you get through the second surgery, because they want to make sure your spine doesn't move all summer long, while everybody else was going to the junior prom and dating and had summer jobs and was getting excited about going to college, I was in a body cast from my shoulders to my knees. And I laid in bed that way all summer long. My grades went up 1.5 points. I was a C+ student. I was an A- student by the end of the summer. And the only time I left the house that summer, well, actually twice. Once, for July 4th, we always went to my aunt and uncle's house for fireworks and barbecue. And my cousins and my brothers and my uncle put me in the back of the station wagon with 100,000 pillows. And they made sure that I would make the ride 5 miles to their house. It was the only time all summer I was out of that cast, except July 28th. And it's funny, all the days we have in our lives that we don't remember, which is most of them, I know this one because July 28th was my brother's birthday. And we had a birthday party for him. He had been dieting. And he was celebrating his birthday and his successful diet by eating so much pizza, he went running upstairs to throw it all out. While he was doing that, my mom's identical twin sister was helping clean up in the kitchen, dropped a plate, and sliced the back of her Achilles tendon. So she was bleeding all over the kitchen. and they put her foot in a big bag of ice in a hefty bag and drove her to the hospital to sew her up. So my poor mom's got my brother thrown up upstairs and her sister's blood all over the kitchen, and she came to see if I was okay, because again, I was laying in a bed in the dining room, just one big plaster guy. And I noticed my left leg was a lot bigger than my right leg. Now, I left the hospital after like a month at about 100 pounds. So I was now somewhere around 125 pounds. So they called one of the doctors. He came out from the city, and he cut my cast open with a saw. He goes, it's probably that you're a teenage boy. You're going through a growth spurt. You've been eating all summer. And we need to get a bigger cast on you. But, what's the but, Doc? Could be a blood clot. I didn't know much about blood clots, but I heard about them. I was 16. I said, I've heard blood clots can go through your veins into your lung and your heart like that and kill you. He goes, yeah, it happens. He goes, I'll see you at the hospital tomorrow. So I'm laying in bed all night. I didn't sleep a wink because I kept waiting for the blood clot to kill me. There wasn't anything I could do about it. I came out of that experience, sort of like the caterpillar and the butterfly. And I was not an introvert anymore. It's not a bad thing to be an introvert. For me, it helps to be extroverted because I like to use my voice a lot. Introverts, you have voices too. So I'm here to talk to you about your voice. I'm here to tell you something. I want you to close your eyes for a second. I want you to hold the hand of the person who will always be there for you no matter what happens to you in your life. So put your left hand in your right hand. And I want you to consider this. As you're working on whatever speeches you're working on here, and you're going out into the world and you will tell your stories, in the history of the world so far, and until the end of time, no one will be able to tell a story quite like you. You open your eyes, you do. That's really powerful. In the history of the world, when you're done here, whatever I tell you, I hope you'll embrace, not so you can be a storyteller like Ben, so you can develop your voice. So, how do we do that? All right, so I told you a story. Again, I didn't time it, but it was somewhere under 5 minutes. And I didn't tell you what we ate. I didn't tell you what we wore. I didn't tell you the names of my cousins. I didn't tell you anything about the apartment we were in. I didn't tell you if anybody else smoked. I didn't tell you years worth of information, so I could tell you a story in 5 minutes. So the most important thing I tell people we need to do as storytellers, whether you're writing a speech or standing up and doing an impromptu talk, is decide what not to say. And that's a lot harder than it sounds, right? What do you not need to tell me? So I was teaching a storytelling class at a university, and we were doing a 2-minute drill. So I was pointing to everybody, you, give me a story. Right, you. So, students, she stands up, and she talks about her semester in Chile, and what a great experience it was. She's from a town about 200 miles north of here. She's from a small town. Here she is in this big city, in a foreign country. She started her story by talking about the woman who housed her making banana pancakes. And she talked about what it smelled like, and she had her banana pancakes. And then she went on to tell the real story, which was on her way to school, she was waiting for the bus, and this young man came up to her. And she was scared, because he didn't just like come up to her, he came up to her. He was a street musician. He was playing for her. And started to talk to her. And in the course of the waiting for the bus, riding the bus, and walking her to her classroom, she got a sense of what it's like to live on the streets and make your living. He was barefoot. He had an instrument. He seemingly didn't have lots of money, nothing like what she was used to back then. And it's really a pretty cool snapshot of what it was like for her to be away for a semester. So when she finished, I said, what in the world banana pancakes have to do with that story? She goes, well, you know, when the day started, I remember that was the first thing. I said, okay, I'm glad you mentioned it, because it's the first thing for you, but as somebody who's here to listen about your story, I don't need to know it. It doesn't help me at all. The point of her story was simply that in a foreign land, a stranger became an acquaintance and didn't hurt her, but helped her and enhanced her whole experience, not just there, but in her life in general, about how she deals with people she doesn't know and what they have to offer her. And pancakes had nothing to do with it. It is hard, really hard, I think, for us to realize what to leave out. So when I do storytelling, some people write every word, and there's nothing wrong with that. I would choke if I had to write a script. I just don't do it. I worked in radio for 20 years. Everything is sort of improv. I have 60 points I'd like to share with you today. I'm not sure if I'll get to all of them. In my mind, this is how it works for me. They're like pieces of a quilt. And I know I was going to tell you today I have a man speech. So that's one quilt. I was going to mention the banana pancakes. That's another piece of the quilt. And I'm going to pick and choose all these other pieces in my mind and weave them into a story where it makes sense. To create a learning community that empowers individuals to become purposeful adults. Familiar? Yeah, see it every day, don't you? That's your mission. It's a great mission. And what is being of purpose? One of the things being of purpose to me is witnessing everybody else's journey. Listening to what they have to say. And along the way, as you learn things about being here, sharing some of what you learn. Because I believe our stories validate our journey and our existence. I know in high school and college, and as a 59-year-old man, I do it now too sometimes, we look at what others have, and we kind of compare, how are we doing compared to them? I'm here to tell you, it really, one thing I have learned in 59 years, that's really irrelevant. Even if it's your siblings or your spouse. You're not comparing yourself to anyone. You are putting together a series of moments that make up your days, your months, your weeks, your years, your seasons, your life. And you do it through story that happens through moments in time. So if you want a little math, I won't give you a lot. If I was to give you 86,400 today, just hand it right to you. And I tell you, here's what you get to do with it. But you have to use it. You can't save it, you can't invest it, you can't give it away. And tomorrow, whatever's left over, you lose. And then tomorrow, what I'm going to do is give you another 86,400. And they're not pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, or dollars. That's how many seconds we have in a day. Our average lifespan is 80 years. That's 28,000 days. It's 4,000 weekends. At 60, that means I've got about 1,000 Saturdays left. And that means you guys probably have about 3,200 Saturdays left. But you will not remember your life in terms of days. I can remember 200 days if you want me to sit and tell you what happened from the beginning to the end of time on that day. We live our lives in moments. I fell, my back popped. That was a moment that was significant and forevermore will be. I walked down the stairs at grad school and I turned where the copier machine was and I saw this gorgeous woman with blue eyes that mesmerized me then, and 36 years later still mesmerized me. It was that moment when I first saw her. There's a million moments I've had with her I don't remember. Our stories begin once upon a time. And that's not just what we tell our kids, or you were told as kids, for bedtime. Every great story, every not great story, every story begins with a moment. Once upon a time, this happened. I was standing in the sanctuary with Meyer Schisler trying to read the Torah. That one moment I get in my stomach when I tell you that, because our moments connect us emotionally. Your stories are nothing if they don't find a way to pull at the heart of your audience. You could be talking about science. You could be talking about speech writing. You could be talking about music. So, a couple other things I will tell you about story. When we share our stories, it's a gift. It also is a time-honored tradition. The oral tradition of sharing story goes back to the beginning of time. Right? And even in this day and age where we text and we tweet and we post, there's a place for us to sit without the electronics and share our stories. Or maybe in your generation's case, our daughter who's 23, she does the same thing, but she does it in a series of texts that drive me nuts. I'd much rather give me 10 minutes to talk to you as opposed to 20 minutes to try to text you. But I'm a slower texter than you guys are. We share our stories because they help validate who we are. When I was a kid, my mother, her name was Merens, knew most of my story. So if I didn't tell my story about me, my mom could. But she's gone now. Most of my elder relatives are gone now. So when you meet me, you're going to know who I am based on the stories I tell you. And we don't have that much time. Today, this is a lot of time. An hour and a half together, that's a lot of time. But I usually have 5 or 10 minutes when I meet with people and move on to my day, and they move on to theirs. So I got to figure, what's the one story I want to tell that has some real serious meaning, that will make sense? Why am I telling you this? I collect stories. I'm fascinated by the stories of others. And I tell people, as you develop your storytelling voice, learn to share the stories of others, because if you're only telling stories about yourself, you will find your audience won't find you interesting. They want you to know you've collected stories from others. You've taken the time to listen to what they have to say. So, I recently left a job. I was called the chief storyteller at a science institute. They do blood research there. And that research they do allows for organs to be transplanted, and for leukemia to be cured, and for blood clots to be fixed. So my job was to find stories to get to your heart about science without using 4, 5, and 6 syllable words. Because I can talk to you about thrombocytopenia, and you can go, that's blood clot. Or I can tell you this. Close your eyes. Go ahead, do it again. Boy, that guy came and made us close our eyes a lot. Put your hand on your chest. Feel your heartbeat. And please keep it there with your eyes gently closed, and let me share the story with you. It's a story about imagination, possibility, and cure. You see, there once was a little baby, we'll call him Joe. He was born with a defective heart. Are you still feeling yours? Are you feeling your beat? His heart did not work like yours does. His mother was told when he was 3 days old he was not going to survive without a heart transplant. So, in order for one mother to feel relief, she almost had to hope another one would suffer as she was suffering, and she didn't want to pray for that to happen, but she wanted to pray for her child to survive. In time, a heart was found, and 2 years later, there was an organ donor reunion in Wisconsin. Joseph's mother shared her story about what it was like to go through the experience of being told her son could die, and then finding out there was a heart, and having the heart transplant work. And she was at an event with Joseph because she had to bring her boy. But he's 2 years old now and he's healthy. So she can't hold him when she speaks. So she mentioned the fact he's here, but he's in the arms of this woman to my right. You can open your eyes now. She points to him, and she points to the woman holding him. She goes, you see, this woman lost her child 18 months ago, but she's now able to feel her child's heartbeat through my son Joe's chest. imagination, possibility, and cure. So why are those three words connected to that story? Because our organs are specific to our bodies. But there are ways to get organs from other bodies and put them in our own. It took the imagination of a scientist to figure out how to make that work, how to consider the possibilities of organ transplantation, and then how to make it work so we have what we consider to be a cure. And that's why Joseph is now in his teens and thriving. When I tell the story the way I told it to you, I'm trying to get awareness and hopefully people to spend money on further research. Because we can transplant hearts, but we can't cure pancreatic cancer yet. We can't cure brain tumors yet. And there are other diseases we can't cure, but we would be able to if we only had enough time and money. So how do we get the process, in this case scientific research, to happen? We tell stories. We engage with people at their heart. When I'm done, if you remember 3 things I've told you today, I've done well. An hour and a half, I'm going to tell you all about 3 things. When I was a talk show host, people listened to me from all over the state and they called the show. And when they called the show, they waited 20 minutes sometimes to get on the air for 20 seconds. 20 minutes. And I spent a lot of time wondering, why do they do that? And I realized they didn't have anybody else to listen to them. They didn't have a friend or a family member who would say, I've got a thought, Ben's talking about Social Security reform, and I've got an idea on how we can fix the Social Security issues that they've got in Washington. Want to hear it? And most of the people looked at them and said no. But they knew I'd listen. So eat for 20 measly seconds. So I wrote a book called People Are Dying to Be Heard. Because that's all I could keep thinking about is these people wanted someone to hear what they had to say. So I tell you this because as you are thinking about what you're writing, and write through this semester, through your life, you're going to have stories to share. Do this with the physical break, makeup on our face, the 2 ears, 1 mouth. If you figure it out, you'll listen twice as much as you speak when it comes to stories. Because there are people all over the world you're going to meet who will have a story and they'll want to share it with you. If only you show them the inclination to listen to what they have to say. So I met a woman at the blood center, and her name is Corinne, and she told me, my sister and my father share a birth date. It's kind of cool, right? Anybody in here have the same birth date as a parent? That's pretty unusual. Her sister and her father both got the flu, and they both died on the same day, down the hall from each other in the same hospital. That's a pretty intense story. We had lunch. I wanted to hear more. She talked to me about her story for 4 hours. Can you imagine listening to somebody's story for 4 hours? Now again, I'm a storyaholic. I like to hear stories, and I got to question her, and I did. And I heard all sorts of stuff. But essentially, what I heard about was how her sister lives on in the chest of somebody else, how she met him, and what she went through, losing her father and her sister in the same day. Most of us don't have 4 hours. And I told her, I said, I can help you hone your story, because you're never going to get someone to sit down with you for 4 hours again. I only guarantee you, it doesn't happen. So some nuts and bolts about stories. It's time for a song. So why do we tell stories? Because we want to inform, we want to educate, we want to entertain, and when we do things well, when we tell our story, we get rid of the stuff we don't need, we make sure that we've said it the way we want to say it, We make the points we want to make. All three of those things, information, education, and entertainment, happen. How many of you, introverts or extroverts, would think that, like the majority of the public speaking is one of the last things you'd ever want to do? So where am I at? My fear isn't public speaking anymore. My fear is not public speaking. I'm 59. I hope I get the 21 years for the average age to be 80. And in that time that I've got an audience to talk to play music for, to entertain. But whether you feel like I do, and I can't tell you exactly why this does this for you, but it does. Or you don't like it a lot, you're going to have to speak in the boardroom, in the classroom, the party, wherever it is. I'm going to tell you a little secret. A little tip. Whenever you have to speak in front of a crowd, so I can see it. Whenever you have to speak in front of a crowd, first thing you should do take a deep breath. Your most powerful tool as a speaker is not the words, it's the silence. And realize already at this age, nobody has looked at you and went running away screaming because of how you look, how you sound, what you're wearing, your hair, your eyes, your nose. The insecurities that the world doesn't have in you, we all have in ourselves. And the best way to get past that is just to sit here. Take a deep breath. I'm not sure what any of you are thinking about me, but I'm living through it. You're looking at me, I'm looking at you. It's a moment. So one of the other things I do is I'm the chief interviewer for a series of Holocaust survivors in a group in Milwaukee. And I learned something about talking to Holocaust survivors for the past 4 years. We always think, oh my God, how did you survive the Holocaust? How did you survive Dachau or Auschwitz, the Death March? And none of them will tell me they did that. They will say, you know, Ben, I survived a day at a time, a moment at a time. I just wanted to get through whatever I had to get through at the moment and prayed that someday it would end. But when I was in the middle of the Holocaust, I was living in the death camp. I had no idea. There was no CNN in the death camps. They didn't know what was going on in the other camps. They didn't know how big the war was. They didn't know if there was going to be an end that day, the next day, or 6 years from then. They just didn't know. It's really how we get through our lives. It's how you would get through your speech, a moment at a time. But know that when you stand up here, just to get your feet comfortable, get set, maybe shoulder length apart. What do you do with your hands? You can't walk with your hands. You want to do that? Years ago, I wrote a song called Take My Hand Through Your Darkness. I was thinking about my mother. She died of a brain tumor within 5 weeks. In the first symptom, we buried her. And I wrote this song about, boy, I wish I could give you my hand and help you through it. And in the middle of the night now, when I'm up and I can't sleep because I worry about things like all of us do, I realize that song wasn't about giving my hand to somebody else. That hand is right here. You hold your own hand. And if standing up here is brutal for you, great. You need somebody to hold your hand, you got yourself. Because ultimately, that's who's going to get you through your speech. Right here. So, I was playing music at this wine bar. And this waitress was living there. And I want to know, how in the world are you making a living in Lake Geneva? Living in Lake Geneva in this wine bar, because we're the only ones here. And she said, well, I don't make my living here. I write about wine for a magazine. And the really cool thing about the job is they send me to Napa Valley 6 times a year. So she gets paid to go to Napa Valley, drink wine, write about it, and then go off with her life. And she said, but I don't live in Lake Geneva. I have an apartment here, but I really live out on the farm with my boyfriend. And we have a pet goat. And his name is Pino. Like the wine, right? A white goat. And he does tricks. I said, like sit, like a dog, roll over? She says, no. I could put Pino on a horse. and hold him. And he will happily bleat and ride around the ring. And I was like, are you kidding me? So then I did something I'd never done before. I wrote a song on the spot about her story. And she said, how did you do that? I said, I don't know, I've never done it before, but that was a heck of a story. So I've been doing improvisational music now for 10 years. And I want to play you this song because it leads into a really cool story. So I was at the wine bar and I met Mary Claire. Mary Claire was a professor in Oregon. And she decided the night that President Obama had gotten elected that she was going to travel around the country and interview people about what Yes We Can, his big slogan, meant to them. And publish a book about the promise of President Obama as heard from 100 Americans from California to New York. And she drove the country in a Mini Cooper all by herself, found people along the way. And she wrote the book 100 Voices. So when I met her, I wrote her a song. Now most of the improv songs I play go away, I never remember them. But I happen to remember this one. So, and it led to a really, one of the most intense experiences in my life. So the song first is called 100 Voices. 100 voices, 1,000 thoughts, 1 million dreams. 100 voices, 1,000 thoughts, 1 million dreams. And the only constant in life is change. I'll share my dreams with you. When we share our dreams, you see, well, that's how those dreams come true. And the only constant in life is change. And we all must be ready to reach away. Now if you share your fears with me, well, I'll share my fears with you. And when we share our fears, you see, oh, they're not so bad if they come true. And the only constant in life is change. Must be ready to, we all must be ready to go. 100 voices, 1,000 thoughts, 1 million dreams. 100 voices, 1,000 thoughts, 1 million, 1 million. 1 million dreams. So I was emceeing this talent show. And I said, I'll do the emceeing, but you better let me play at least one song. And they said, fine, you get one song, but we allow performance of it. And I played that song. And I said, the essence of what I do, and the essence in that song is we all have a voice, and it matters. And every one of our voices is unique, so we don't have to worry if it's as good as somebody else's or as bad as, what have we learned along the journey as we take the journey in life that we can teach ourselves and others? And we do it with our voice in whatever way. You can do it with poetry, you can do it with art, you can do it with guitar, you can sing it, you can talk it. This woman comes on, she says, I had a set of music I was going to play tonight, but I'm not going to do it. Well, the room's curious. She said, you know, when I was a little girl, I used to sit at the foot of my dad, and he played guitar, and I wanted to play guitar too, just like my dad. Now the whole room's warm and fuzzy, this is great. Then comes the bomb. But when I was older, as a teenage girl, I became a victim of incest at the hands of my father. And everyone in that room lost the ability for one moment to breathe. And then she went on, she said, I have been writing music to cope with the pain ever since. I'm now in my 40s. And I've never dared play the music before. And I'm going to play it for you now. Why? All nights. She then plays 3 of the most intense songs I've ever heard, the bravest performance, bar none, I've ever witnessed. And I went up to her in the intermission in the green room. I didn't know her, so it was taking a little bit of a chance, but I didn't ask permission. I put my arms around her, and I hugged her, and I said, that was the bravest performance I've ever seen. That was amazing. I've got to ask, why tonight? You've never played it before. You said you had a set of music, and you changed it from all these people you don't really know that well, and you bare your soul beautifully. But why? And she looked at me, it's just because of you. I said, me? It's like, don't blame me. It's like, what do you mean, me? She goes, your song, about having a voice, and I realized the songs I had were just songs. The music I sang tonight really was my voice. It was something I had to express. And you told me that that was what I should be doing. I was like, your stories and your voice aren't just for you. You may be helping somebody else in ways you'll never know. Or in this case, in a way that I didn't know. And I said, I've probably written 1,000 songs I just give away. The one I regret the most is the next song I wrote after she told me her story in the green room. I sat down with her and I wrote a song about inside every young girl there's a crystal. It's really delicate. And no matter what happens to her in her lifetime, nobody and nothing shatters that crystal. She will always be whole no matter what happens to her. And when the song was done, we both were crying. And I said to her, you know, I wrote that. She goes, yeah, I figured that was one of yours. I said, no, I just wrote it. It's gone now. No one will ever hear it again because I won't remember it in 5 minutes. And I don't. But I know that I can always write a new song. So I just keep doing it. I don't record them a lot. Some I do, not many. But more importantly, it was an example of how I had a voice that touched somebody else, that gave them permission to have a voice. Your stories can do that. I'm nothing special. I'm just a guy who's standing here because I happen to be at the stage in life where I know enough to come share with you. Someday you could be standing here in front of people telling them this. But I can tell you that your voice matters. I wish somebody had told me that in high school. I, as I said, was quite introverted and shy. Didn't think my voice mattered at all. And then when I finally started to come out of it, I was just wanting to make sure I could walk again. Incidentally, at the end of that summer, they took me out of the cast. They put me in a half cast. So I went to senior year in a half cast, but I was mobile. That following February, they took the rod out. So now I'm pretty much mobile and can do almost anything I want to do, not limited by back surgery at all. So let's practice a little bit about what I'm talking about. First of all, can we all stand up? You guys have been great. It's been almost an hour. Come on, just a little stretch. Do it now, fast, because when I tell you to sit down, you know, you sit up. All right, well, sit back down. You have 2 moments. Okay. Larry Smith. Larry Smith. Decided to start a magazine. He's a pretty creative guy, but he's not very creative with names. What do you think he called the magazine? Smith, Smith Magazine. And Larry Smith decided to test his audience and say, listen, I want you to consider writing me a memoir. 6 words. You should think about a story and write it in 6 words. So for instance, baby shoes for sale, never worn. I don't know the backstory to that. We assume the baby died. As I have heard it and said it, the more and more I've said it, I've hoped it means the baby was born in Northern California and had a hippie mother and father and decided the baby would never need shoes. They just sold the shoes. But the chances are the baby died. We don't know. You're all working on something. So whether it is the project you're working on or another story, let's take 5, 10 minutes. Because you can write 6 words really fast. But I'm talking about 6 words that mean something. So let's take a couple minutes and write a 6-word memoir. I'm going to ask some of you to read them, so be prepared to explain them.
About our speech.
It could be. It doesn't have to be. It could be about your pet dog, it could be about your mother, it could be about school, it could be about how you're feeling, it could be about what you ate for lunch again. But how can you use 6 words and make me feel something? Make me react. Happy, sad, glad, surprised. The power of for sale, baby shoes, never worn. It's pretty powerful stuff. Raise them high so I get a sense of meaning. All right, so those of you who are still working on it, please work on it. Anybody want to share one? Yeah. Stand up,
Oh.
because I want you to practice the first thing I taught you to do.
Like, you mean just like,
I want you to breathe and then read your 6-word memoir.
oh, okay, I thought you meant like tell a story.
No, just the
Okay.
6 words.
Lonely, person, light, comic, no more.
Lonely, person, light, comet, no more. A lot there. Now, one of the cool things about not getting the backstory is that you get to ponder. What's the message there? Right? Because when we're telling our story, and thank you for starting, it's a scary thing to do.
Very.
It is. But how are you doing now?
I'm in limbo right now. Like, there's happiness, but then there's like, oh.
No. I mean, how did you feel about surviving going first?
Oh, I feel pretty good.
Yeah, you survived.
I
You didn't die.
I think.
But you guys are at, and by the way, this doesn't change, it just becomes your ability to deal with it does. How you're feeling, how you're doing, where you're at in your life, what it's. An English teacher used to stand up in front of us, he goes, Mr. McCloskey, well, and he was an elder, what's it all about? Alfie. That was the name of a movie in a book at the time. I didn't know anything about it. All I know is he stood there staring at us. And I was like, what is he trying to get us to do? And he's trying to get us to think about what's our life about? What's this class about? What's the journey we're on about? That's what he was trying to do. By the time I figured it out, he was long gone. Funny thing about Mr. McCloskey, he didn't like big pens, ballpoint pens. We had to have those pens with the ink cartridges. You guys ever used one? They still have them? Yeah? Well, because he made everyone get them, our papers were a mess because it was just a blob of ink. And when he wasn't looking, everybody loved to do this with them. So our curtains were drenched in blue ink because of Mr. McCloskey. But the point being, you opened our minds, if we were listening to you just now, to go, wow, there is a lot there. In only 6 words. Now, sometimes it helps to have it explained, and other times it's kind of nice to let it just sit. So who else has one you'd like to share? Any lady? No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You.
For 10 years, she hurt me.
For 10 years she hurt. Brave. Thank you. And again, these are meant to be personal statements. And the beauty of them is personal statements that you do not have to then explain yourself, right? That sounds like it has the weight of the world on your shoulders. I don't know if it does or not. But it had me do this. Our words, our messages are powerful stuff. And whether it's a school project about something that may or may not be really important to you, your ability to get in front of a group and command their attention for 6 words or for an hour, it's well within your grasp. And for me, there's sort of the art of not knowing exactly what's going to come out and making it work anyway. So I've done this presentation of tons, but I've never done it exactly the same way. I have a one-man show in 2 weeks. I call it One Night Only. I hope to go to Broadway with it someday. But whether I do it 1 night or 100 nights just in Milwaukee, every night will be different because I can't do it the same way twice. So you don't have to get up and be a robot in how you present it. You just have to present something that's interesting first to you. Let's get a couple of memoirs and I want to talk about your project a little bit.
Scarred love, healed again, healed up, whole again.
Very nice. So our daughter's 23. She's at Harvard, of all places. And she just got kicked in the shins by the department because she had a lab all set up to do a research in, but it was through a cross program at MIT. And then she was told Monday, oh, you can't. We're not letting you. So she called me, really? That's his mom at work. Usually she calls him. But she wanted to talk about how terrible life has treated her. Well, by Friday, she had called Mom to tell her how she'd gotten even with Harvard. She'd gotten a better life. Our lives are often not about failing to get knocked down, because we're going to get knocked down a lot. It is about how do we get back up. Whole again, is that what you said? Yeah. How are you whole again?
Life is knowing build it.
Life is known building. In two more words, huh?
No, it's life is knowing you build it.
New building?
You build it.
We're never done knowing. But after a while, you get to be 16, 17, 18 years old, you know stuff. You get to be 59, you start forgetting your stuff. But you also want to keep building on what you know. So some of these are serious things. Some are just the life journey things. And some are our life philosophy, right? How are we learning these? Now you can go online and go see 6-word memoirs. They're all segmented. He's published millions of these. He thought he was just going to get a couple hundred. He's published millions. And the cool thing he does, and we're not going to do it today, but it's a cool exercise. I'd gladly come back, or you can do it amongst yourselves. You do your 6-word memoirs, and then you do a program with the backstory. You explain what you just did. So Larry Smith will travel the country, and he will go, and he will ask someone to do their memoir, and the audience is like, oh my God. And then the person who wrote it stands up and says, let me tell you what that's about. Anybody else want to give us one?
I did one about you.
Oh, God.
Right? So, this is from what I've gained from listening to you. So you have a lot of fire. You have a lot of courage. You're gentle. You have a lot of love, a lot of soul, and you're very fatherly.
I should send that to my daughter. That's nice. Thank you.
Also, I drew you. So
You drew me. Thank you. So when I left public radio, and I was there 21 years, I thought I'd retire there. But life knocks you down. So when I thought I was going to get my new contract, I was being told, we're not giving you the contract. Okay. When I talk to my audience and tell them, I'm not going to be back, they called the show and they said, you know, you don't know me, but we're best friends. I said, what does that mean? I said, I listen to you every day because of the gentleness in your voice. I know that no matter what happens in my life that day, I don't care who you're talking to, I want to hear what you have to say. And it taught me that, not just about me, it's true of all of us. I just happen to have a radio platform for it. What we do puts ripples out there, right? How you say what you say, whether you hold the door for a classmate or an old lady, or you don't, whether you rush or you walk, we put ripples out into the world most of the time. I call this the curse of the second-grade teacher. We put ripples out there. Second-grade teachers, they raise all of us, and then we go away, and they never hear from most of us. And yet, a lot of what we learn in life, we learn in that second-grade classroom. Those ripples aren't always apparent to us, and they don't have to be. Know that your words and your voice, your messages, all have value. You don't have to even understand the value of them yet. Some people never understand their value. Others just figure out, you know what, I'm going to hope that they do. I want to tell you a story because it's practice for the one-man show, but it's just, I love this story. It's about the power of just listening to somebody else's story. So I worked with Siobhan at public radio for 20 years. And she was the sister I never had. And we talked to each other about everything, raised our kids alongside each other, and had birthdays and celebrations and lost family members together. One day she walked by my office and I saw she looked depressed. And I thought, well, you're supposed to be her friend and you're Mr. Listener. Why don't you ask her how she's doing? So she came into my office and I asked her what's wrong and she started to cry. But just a tear at a time. just a tear, and then she'd wipe it. She goes, I'm so depressed. I haven't slept in 8 weeks. I'm insomnia. My marriage isn't going well. I have 3 kids, not 2. I come home and my husband's wondering what's for dinner at 8 o'clock at night when the 2 kids are waiting for dinner for me to cook it. He could have cooked it. She had a sister who was a triathlete and was a flight attendant for an airline, but suffered a massive heart attack and stroke and was bedridden and never came out of the coma. And she said, I don't know, I can't stand my job. I don't want to be here anymore. I can't stand going home. So I held her hand. She cried. I suggested, some of the basics. Have you seen clergy? Have you talked to a counselor? None of what she really wanted to hear. So I said, do me a favor. I have to go do my show. When I come out of the studio in 2 hours, I want you gone. Don't go home. Go feed yourself. Go shopping. Go to the lake. Go eat. Go do something that will make you feel good for just a moment. Give yourself a moment of pleasure. And I came out of the studio and she was there. I said, you told me you were going to leave. She goes, well, I know I'm leaving. I said, no, you're not leaving. You're here. You're supposed to be leaving, and I'm leaving. So bye. Now, in 20 years of friendship at this radio station, there's one thing she never ever did. Called me at home. And that night she called, and she says, you're never going to guess what happened. And all I could think of was her sister magically came out of that coma she'd been in for 6 months. And she goes, of course not, Ben. I told you, she's never coming out of the coma. I'm like, Siobhan, why did you call me at home after 20 years? She goes, I got a phone call. I said, you got a phone call? She goes, yeah, when you left, the phone rang, and I answered it, and this guy said, excuse me, I'm trying to find the name of a song. And she said, I was thinking I really should have left the radio station when you did. Because we get lots of calls at the radio station, and usually it's stuff that eats up a lot of time. And at that time of night, she just wanted to leave. But she couldn't hang up on the guy. He said, please don't hang up on me. I've called 3 radio stations, and everyone has hung up on me. So now here's this woman with all these problems, but in her hands has been placed a man with a problem she may be able to help. And one of the ways we get through the problems that we have in this world is by forgetting we have them and help somebody solve their own. And then sometimes ours don't seem as bad. So she said, well, sir, you've called a talk radio station, and I'm in sales. So I don't know anything about music to help you. He goes, please, everybody else hung up on me. I didn't even know I'd called a radio station this time. She goes, sir, you want a name of a song? Do you know anything about it? He goes, well, oh yeah, it's a religious song. Do you know anything else, sir? No. You don't know who sings it? No. You don't know who wrote it? No. Oh, I know one line from it, he said. I know one line. She goes, okay, what's that? Maybe I can look it up on the computer for you. What's the line, sir? And he paused. And he said, the line I know is, God says everything will be all right. She was shocked. She goes to church regularly. She prays regularly. She's a believer in the faith. And she said, excuse me? What did you say? God says everything will be all right. And he paused. That's the line I'm talking about. So she looked it up. She actually found a song with that line in it. I was discovering tons of them. She found one. And he started to thank her, and she said, no, sir. No. Don't thank me. It's I who should thank you. Because for reasons you don't need to know, I'm going through a tough time right now. And I am a woman of deep faith. And I don't think for a minute, with the million people in Milwaukee you could have called by mistake, and you called me, and the only message you had was that God says everything will be all right. I owe you the thank you. And she went home that night, and she slept for the first time in 8 weeks. Her sister, unfortunately, didn't get better, and the marriage didn't get better. But that moment changed her life, not because of anything she did, other than giving her time and attention to the story of somebody else. So sometimes it isn't your story that's so crucial. It's your willingness to hear somebody else's story. I always have to point this out. Some people will take advantage of that. They will go on, or they don't know what to leave out. So this is where I teach, and this kind of goes against the mindset of the people of the Midwest, and I am a Midwesterner, but I'm married a New Yorker. And that is interrupting is rude. Interrupting is not rude. Interrupting with intention is respectful as you can be. Stop me, say, wait, you just said this, I'm curious about, and you fill in the blank. If you interrupt and show me you weren't listening to me by the question you asked, the lack of focus on what I said is where the rude part comes in. It's not the interruptions. So, instead of knowing where to start and where to stop. So about 15 more minutes, and then after that, the hope was some of the stuff I said may get you to want to go sit down and start writing and working. If you want to do any questions one-on-one, I'm happy to do that too. But do you have questions about things I've said or that you're working on that we can talk about? Because I could do a lot more of this stuff, but it can wait. Well, I've done more than you probably need to take in for this afternoon. But what are you working on? Is it writers, speakers, students? That something I said may have prompted a question that if you ask and I answer, everybody may benefit from. Stretching or question? Go on a broad,
Oh, yeah,
you want to ask me a question about something I've said? Are you asking a question?
No, I was stretching.
How's the stretch going? It's kind of a half stretch. Other questions? About anything else? What experience in my life is talking about? There's so many of them. But when I went to college, I was in Madison. And back then, summer jobs were, or part-time jobs, working at a bar, didn't really want to do that. Working at Kinko's, yes, people actually went to a store and paid people money to make copies of paper that now you do on your own. I answered an ad, wanted singing telegram man. So in between my math class, my Hebrew, and my English, and my history, I put on a yellow ruffled tuxedo shirt, and a red jacket, and a top hat. And the first job I got was at American Family Insurance. And I'm not from Madison, so I didn't know anything about American Family. It's one of the biggest insurance companies in the world, certainly in the state. And I was going to sing to this woman on her birthday during her lunch break. So when I went to her office and she wasn't there, I was like, great, because I was scared and I was thinking, maybe I should just leave. And they said, no, you're supposed to sing at lunch. And they walked me to the lunchroom where hundreds of people were eating. And I looked around the room, and imagine this room full of people all the way to the back wall. And I'm 19 years old thinking, if I leave now, I can get out of here. But I lose my job. And I didn't want to lose the job. It paid pretty well. I didn't want to work at a bar or at Kinko's. So I got up on the table, and I said, ladies and gentlemen, it's Kathy Smith's birthday. And now I've got the room's attention. This doesn't happen every day anymore. And I felt up the song. And I forgot some of the words. This is what lesson is. But when you do improv, singing, if you can make the words rhyme at the end of the sentence, nobody knows whether or not that was the original script. So when I got stuck in the words, but I didn't let them see it. I got stuck in my mind. I did. For the presentation, I just felt it. And I walked out of there knowing that this is something I could do. So when I got between undergrad and grad school, was back in Chicago, and I applied for a singing telegram job. They said, do you have any experience? Like, I said, yes, actually, 18 months. The guy looked at me and goes, really? You're hired. And I go around Chicago, dressed as a gorilla and a clown and a couple other things. And I made a living for 8 months before I went to grad school. Because I realized nobody wants to be a singing telegram person for a career. But I learned it. You know, that doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I can get in front of groups and, you know, not a great singer, then or now. And back then, man, it was scary. But it didn't kill me. It's maybe scary. It scares me. Other questions?
So I noticed you have some notes up there
but you didn't stand up at a podium and constantly look at your notes. For our students who are preparing a speech and delivering it in about 5 weeks, how would you suggest they approach that difference between using their notes and not?
If it's a fear of God in you to speak without your notes, word for word, write your speech. I've done that. I don't like it now, but I've done it. I often will work with bullet points because I'm looking at them as pieces of a quilt. So no two speeches for me are the same. But if this is a big deal for you just to give the speech, don't do that unless you're comfortable with it. Either way, practice it. Literally stand in front of the mirror in the bathroom, in front of mom or dad, alone. Everybody's got a phone these days, right, with voice memos, so you can all record it. I want to tell you a secret about recording and listening to your voice. Like I said before about how you look. Nobody, I'm sure, in this room has ever said anything. Hello, please, can I order this? See you tomorrow, and had somebody go running the other way because your voice is so bad. So when you hear it on the voice memo, don't think my voice is terrible. Just think, oh, that's how my voice sounds, because that's how your voice sounds. It's not terrible. It's just something you're not used to hearing, because when you speak, it goes out this way. When you hear it from the machine, it comes in your ear this way. So you're actually hearing it the way everybody else does. And nobody's laughing at your voice, so you should be kinder about your voice. That was the toughest job in radio I had, listening to myself and getting used to it. Listen to how you give the speech. Where do you pause? Where do you punctuate a word? Your speech shouldn't be given just like this. I'm here to talk to you today about making apples and honey for the Jewish holiday of Tu B'Shvat. It's a holiday where we celebrate trees and the sweetness, and we have honey. You can do that. Or, you say, I'm here to talk to you about apples and honey. Do I love honey? There's actually a holiday, a whole holiday around apples and honey. Holiday of Tu B'Shvat. We're using it. Foreign language. And if it's just an interesting word, foreign language or not, use it and pause with it. You play with the words. Right? So if you have played with clay before and you've mushed it around your hands and you've made something, same thing with the words. I'm up here playing with the clay. My clay are words. By the way, I often will have something that's round in my hand. Today it's a marble. And people ask, why do you do that? And it's to remind me as I'm speaking to you, there's no beginning and there's no end to where we are. We are all in the middle. We're in the middle of the universe. We're in the middle of our lives. We're in the middle. So don't worry about how it's all going to end, even the speech, or how it all started. Just remember that you're always in middle, and be present in middle. When you're giving your speech, if you're reading it word for word, and you stumbled on a word 3 sentences ago, that's done. You'll never get that moment back, so don't worry about it. It's not about perfection. However you give your speech, memorize it, read it, bullet points. I guess if you're totally petrified, you could record it and then get permission to just turn the recorder on. And people who listen to you, so you don't have to stand up here. But there is a real joy for the most feared of us about standing up here to getting through it. And you will all get through it. And in your lives, whether you're a teacher or you're in a boardroom or a committee meeting, you're going to be inclined to speak sometime. And I say, oh really? Ben, you have something to say? And now I'm giving a speech. Yeah, I think we should, on a committee at our synagogue, a budget committee, should we raise dues? I think this. Now all of a sudden I'm speaking and they're listening. And it's no different than you standing up here and giving your speech, right? You have a thought. The key, more important than how you write it, or if you write it out, is finding something in the topic that drives you, right? So if you're talking about applesauce, find something about applesauce that drives you. I don't know what it's like to remember when you had it as a kid. Or even better than that was toothpaste. I went to buy toothpaste the other day at Walgreens. I've never given this speech before, it's off the top of my head, right? But it comes in kind of, how do you find something interesting? When I was your age, there was about 20 brands of toothpaste, and that seemed like a lot. There must be 100 different toothpaste on the shelf, and if I don't just grab it from the cabinet at home, because my wife has already bought it, I have to stand there and go, wait a minute. Do I want this or this? And it's like, you'd be mesmerized. Like 15 minutes, it was a toothpaste tube. But why do they have so many different choices? What's the point? There's the whitening stuff and the tartar control stuff, and if you have bleeding gums stuff, and there's some of the sprinkles in it. And I'm like, oh my God, why do they have so many of these things? I don't know. It puzzles me. I wonder about these things. So if I was to stand here and give you a speech about toothpaste, that's probably how I would start it. Part of it is because I like to speak, but part of it is that subject fascinated me. Just looking at the different options. Variety. The variety of things that you will talk about. Find something in there that strikes curiosity in you. Because if it does, your audience will feel that too. Because your speech isn't just for you, it's for your audience as well. But if it doesn't have some component of interest for you, your audience will never feel what you want them to.
Sorry to dominate the questions, but so I wanted to share a couple things. So I was in radio, TV, film as a freshman in college, and I dropped out because I couldn't stand the sound of my voice in first semester because I had to do different assignments and listen to myself. So when you said that, that resonated with me. I didn't have anyone to tell me that it was okay, that I didn't like the sound of my voice. And then I was in journalism, and then as a writer, I found it oftentimes just the most frustrating thing to write the opening, the lead of a story. And sometimes that would take me, I'm not even joking, like hours to write the first few sentences. Now you're an impromptu speaker and you don't seem to have trouble coming up with like ways to start things, but for them, how would you suggest, like, would you suggest they experiment with different approaches or go with the first thing that comes to their mind, or how would you suggest doing that?
Well, two things. One, I'm sorry, but nobody's there to tell you because you could have been, that's great, you know, Walter. When I started my college at Drake University in Iowa, and I had a girlfriend, and she was in Minnesota, and we worked at a camp in Economork, so for our summer vacation time from the camp, we went to Madison. We thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could be together in school? Why don't we go to Madison? And my first reaction was, oh no, look at all the people. I could never do this. And then I thought, 40,000 other kids can't all be smarter than me. There'll be a couple hundred that aren't as smart as me, so I'm going to try it. So I did two things that were great for my life. One, I moved to Madison. And two, we kind of broke up. I was a journalist. I worked in newspapers. I worked in radio. And while I'm impromptu, and I'm pretty much a one-take Charlie, so my wife was writing an article for LinkedIn the other day. She's an English teacher and a theater a poet and a literature writer for the most part. But I thought, you know what, I'm doing all this work. Maybe I should throw something up on LinkedIn. So I put together a storytelling sheet. And at the bottom of it, this was all impromptu, one take, I wrote that I'm a storytelling consultant and I can be reached for phone conversations. So as I'm trying to develop this consultancy, I got my first international client yesterday. Based on putting it out there. And I'm going to be talking to this woman in London next week, being paid money, good money for it, because I dared to put it out there. But the other thing I do when I write, and this goes back to when I would write it and rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it, but always keep it simple. You know, subject, verb, direct object. You don't have to write the great American speech or novel or project. Write it simple, and when you're comfortable with the simple, you want to add to it and layer it, go ahead. But to get started, you keep it simple, and then you move on. And that's, when I started writing, I would go to school board meetings. Think about boring, right? When you're in the middle of a school board meeting, nobody's there but the board members and me, because none of the public cares about this stuff. And they're talking about changing the curriculum. Well, I write the word curriculum, that was hard enough, but how am I going to make a sentence out of that? And so how can I make it simple? There will be more math at X school next year. Right? How do you simplify it? That's what they decided that night. The so-and-so school board voted to increase the amount of hours math is taught to students in grades 4 through 6 starting next fall. Really simple. The meeting wasn't that simple, but that's how I understand things. I try to make it really simple. So when I write it, And then after you write it, if you can do this for some planning, so you don't write it and have to hand it in 2 minutes later, read it. Read it out loud and tape it. Read it to your friends, read it to your neighbors, read it to your parents. Read it to someone and say, how does this sound to you? Because they may say, yeah, I really like that, but you know, you use the word goodoggle. That's a goodoggle. Say, oh, no, I didn't use goodoggle. Oh, you know what goodoggle is? I better explain it. I don't know, there's a word goodoggle. But yeah, so start simple. Because you can always get complicated. It's easier so here and then that.
I was wondering, along those lines, and partly about what you said earlier about perhaps what you leave out is one of your biggest or most important decisions. Do you have a process for that as well, or strategies for choosing what's important and what's not?
When it comes to your story, whatever your story is, realize nobody knows it all like you do. But you can't tell it all. So think about if you only could say, well, in journalism, they have what they call the inverted pyramid, right? Who, what, where, when, why, and how. And the reason they taught journalists to write that way is in World War II, the reporters were over in Europe covering the war. And at any moment, a bomb could drop and destroy the communications from Europe to the United States. So as a reporter, they taught you 10 children died when a bomb exploded in a school in Hamburg. Right? That's the story. You could tell nothing else. If you get the second sentence, they were in the playground when the rest of the school were in the basement because a bomb siren had just gone off and they didn't make it back. And you can layer it. If you start what's most important. If you start, it was a partly cloudy day when the bomb started falling over Hamburg Thursday, right? That's also true, but I don't know that I have the time to tell you what the weather was. So I want to tell you what happened. When it comes to the woman who was in Chile, it's irrelevant for the point that I learned something about another culture by talking to a man who lives on the street and plays music. It's irrelevant what she ate that day. It just isn't important. But she had to think about, okay, what's really important? So one of the first things you should do when you sit down to write is not write at all. Sit in your hands and think, what do I want to say? And maybe you draw it in picture. Or maybe you just draw it in single words or 6-word memoirs, but you want to get the essence of what is your message. What are you talking about? So if you're going to tell me I'm doing a speech on Valley News School for the city council for a bunch of people who've never been here, are you going to talk about the fact you're in a mall? It's kind of interesting, but probably not anywhere near as interesting as how you work and what you work on and how the education process is structured here, especially compared to the typical high school that we may know of if we've never been here, right? So again, you know more than you need to tell. What do you want to tell if you can only tell a little bit that's the most important thing you have to say? And it's sort of trial and error. I mean, put something in that's not all that important, and after your speech, somebody says, "Can I ask you a question? Why did you tell me about the apple pancakes or banana pancakes?" Like, oh, maybe I should have. Or maybe I need to explain better why that's important. But again, it's being conscious of the fact it's what you leave out, but being more focused on why you're putting in what you put in. Then that will make that what you leave out easy.
So when I get excited, especially if I'm talking in front of a lot of people, I tend to stutter a lot, or my brain goes blank, which either leads to dead word, like filler words, or dead air. So what is your suggestion on fixing that issue?
Drinking water.
Water, silence, and I'm partial to this. When you're a kid, you need to be soothed. I'm 59. I still need to be soothed. So No one will ever give you a hard time taking a sip of water. Take a deep breath. Or, when our daughter was in middle school, we got involved in forensics. She went on to high school to debate. We stayed in middle school forensics. There was this kid, happens to also be a vet, stuttered like crazy. And my wife is the coach of the forensics team, says, I got this kid. And he wants to do whatever, oratory, and he stutters. I don't know what I'm going to do with him. So you know the first speech he did the first year, and he went to state with it? He did an oratory about stuttering. So if he stuttered, it was part of what he was doing. And the following year, he had honed the speaking to the point where he didn't stutter like he used to stutter. He hit it head on. So, it happened. So even if your speech is about apples and honey, but you start stutter. Yeah, sometimes I stutter. Do you ever find that you stop and start things? For me, it's speech. As I was saying, the apples and honey, you know, it's the elephant in the room, so talk about, hey, here's an elephant in the room. Doesn't make you a bad person. Lots of people out there who stutter. And then people overcome it. Just different ways to do it. But if it's a momentary, I'm nervous kind of stutter. Nice deep cleansing breath. And if that's not enough, some water. Because in the time I breathe and I sip my water, you're here. You haven't left. So your audience won't leave you. If you stand and do nothing for 20 minutes, you may lose your audience. But for 20 seconds. But that's as tough a challenge as there is if you're a speaker. But there are lots of great speakers who have overcome it. In fact, if you look it up, I don't know them off the top of my head, but if you look up great orators who had a stutter, you'll be amazed. It happens. I lisped when I was a kid. I had speech therapy in first grade for my R's, my TR's, and my SH's. And I went on to become a radio broadcaster. So, you know, you can overcome these things. I also had a roommate in college. He was a law student. We were sharing an apartment that this professor was on sabbatical. It's a really nice place. And I told him I was getting my master's in journalism with the idea of being in broadcasting. And he goes, well, you know, I used to be in broadcasting. He was like 24, so how could you used to be? He goes, you don't have the voice. So I'm just telling you, because I know you'll never be in radio, so don't even plan on that. And I learned a very valuable lesson there. So you know the valuable lesson I learned? If it's something you really want to do, don't let somebody who says no drive your thinking. Maybe it drives your effort to prove them wrong. But if it's something you really want to do, to have somebody else tell you you can't do it, life's too short. Don't let them have that power over you. So one more song? So, Don McLean of American Pie fame, you know Don McLean? Yeah. He sings this song. And so do the reggae bands all over the world. And it turns out it comes from the Bible. I didn't know this. I'm not that religious a guy, that's why I'm playing this. It's called By the Rivers of Babylon. And its message, this is why I play this, is that no matter where you go and where you are in life, you have the right to have your voice. Even if it's only in your mind in a prayer to be held, let alone to speak to other people. Nobody has the right to silence you completely in this world. That's just not acceptable. So, Don McLean sings this, by the waters of Babylon, we lay down and worked for thee, Zion. And the reggae band sing it, by the rivers of Babylon, where we lay down and there we worked and remember Zion. And somewhere in between is the way I do it. And I have started, actually with this song, with the last 10 years, sometimes when I play, I call this gig tapping, because it's a little combination of drumming and playing. So this is Babylon. by the waters of Babylon. We lay down and weep. We lay down, weep for these Zion. Oh, may the words of my heart and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, oh Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Oh, by the waters of Babylon. We lay down and wept. We lay down and wept for these islands. We remember these islands. By the waters of Babylon. The title of the audiobook, People Are Dying to Be Heard, is that because I learned others are dying to be heard, but nobody's dying to be heard that I know of as much, if not more than you, which is why I'm grateful for you taking time out of your work day to sit here and listen to what I have to say. I hope it's helped. I'm not leaving. If any of you want to talk one-on-one about any of your projects, I'm glad to help with that. Or if you want to email me with questions about it at some point, it's fine with me if it's fine with your school. In the meantime, thanks again. I appreciate your time and attention. If I've earned the applause now, I take them, not at the beginning of the speech.